Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, December 6th. This week, police warn body cameras are expanding across the country, and in some places they're being paired with new AI tools that raise serious questions about oversight and public transparency. We're also watching a surge of major developments out of Alberta, from an influential access to information ruling to new concerns about digital ID, healthcare numbers, and AI-driven infrastructure. Across Canada, we have important stories about long-term care gaps for Indigenous elders, cyber attacks, fraud risks, and a growing wave of holiday scams. And internationally, major rulings and investigations are shaping what we know, and what the public may soon learn about powerful institutions, from social media platforms to the U.S. justice system. And before we dive in, a reminder. The Senate is expected to move quickly on the federal bill that would allow political parties to operate outside Canada's privacy principles. You'll find links in our show notes where you can make your voice heard with the minister and with your local member of parliament. Let's dive in. We start with two stories that show how rapidly police technology is changing. Steve Lambert at the Canadian Press finds that around 98% of Manitoba's frontline RCMP officers are now equipped with body-worn cameras. The force says the program has generated more than 175,000 pieces of digital evidence, and footage has already been used in 2 police shooting investigations. Winnipeg has been looking at adopting body cameras for its municipal police force, but City Council has cited concerns over the cost. Across the country, the RCMP has been rolling out body-worn cameras, and some other forces use them already. The RCMP is also discussing whether more raw footage should be released publicly, but those decisions remain subject to privacy review from the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. Meanwhile, in Alberta, multiple outlets including CBC News report that Edmonton police have begun testing AI-powered facial recognition body cameras, without approval from the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner, Diane McLeod. Up to 50 officers have already been equipped with body cameras from the Arizona-based company Axon Enterprise. The cameras are only to be used when police are actively investigating or enforcing laws. McLeod says the law is clear. Even pilot projects must undergo a full privacy impact assessment before launching, as stated by Section 7 of the Protection of Privacy Act. Police disagree, arguing that early-stage trials don't require prior approval. Her office is now reviewing the assessment and will comment once that process is complete. Here at FIPA, we're always a bit concerned when we see police agencies using novel technology that impacts the personal information of Canadians. Enabling mobile predictive policing can punish people for pre-crime, the plot points that form the basis of multiple dystopian futures. We'll be sure to keep a watchful eye on this and bring you more in the weeks ahead. So many major developments came out of Alberta this week that we're bringing them together in a single spotlight. LGI reporter Natasha Belowski at Canada's National Observer reports that Alberta has secured a sweeping memorandum of understanding with Ottawa, one that exempts the province from clean electricity rules, drops the proposed emissions cap, and supports a new bitumen pipeline to the west coast through a marine-protected area as well as Indigenous land. Council of the Haida Nation President, Gaguis, told Canada's National Observer the federal government did not speak with him, despite the Haida Nation currently negotiating its title to the waters oil tankers would threaten. The deal has triggered political fallout in both provinces and raised major access to information questions, including how the agreement was negotiated behind closed doors and what records shaped the final terms. Meanwhile, LGI reporter Brett McKay at the Investigative Journalism Foundation revealed that a company called CoinCorp is lobbying the province to integrate AI into Alberta's digital ID framework and explore AI-controlled traffic light systems. CoinCorp describes itself as a company providing policy advice on crypto, financial markets, as well as AI and related tech. The same company has previously lobbied for decentralized finance platforms and federal crypto regulations, raising questions about how these proposals intersect with personal information protections. Though CoinCorp, formerly operating as Coin Corporation, is lobbying on a number of different business areas, it isn't clear how the company is connected with these ventures. Staying in Alberta, a second story from the Canadian Press highlights growing concern from Privacy Commissioner Diane McLeod about the government's plan to put healthcare numbers directly on drivers' licenses. McLeod warns this could increase fraud, expose sensitive records, and place highly personal data in the hands of agencies not covered by provincial privacy law. The government also plans to add mandatory citizenship markers to licenses and other forms of ID. McLeod said she had warned the government to abandon its plan because the Alberta government body responsible for driver's licenses, the Registrar of Motor Vehicles, isn't subject to privacy laws. We're hoping this is another lapse of judgment from this government treating cautionary dystopian tales as aspirational goals. And finally, LGI reporter Chevy Rabbit at Alberta Native News covers a landmark ruling that compels Frog Lake First Nation and Indigenous Services Canada to release key financial documents. The case began with whistleblower Hans McCarthy and has now set a national precedent, one that strengthens the right of band members to access trust fund records, band council resolutions, and financial information that had long been withheld. After McCarthy originally spoke up about the mismanagement of funds, he was blacklisted from most services offered by the band, including housing, education, and workplace employment. The legal process included access to information requests, lawyers drafting letters, and nearly 3 years in court. Turning to access and transparency across the country. In Manitoba, the Canadian Press reports that conservation officers assigned to support broader surveillance have seen almost no activity, and a recent FOI request found no records that conservation officers helped with arrest, drug seizures, or intervention. According to statistics from the Canada Border Services Agency, the number of foreign nationals being detained after coming into Manitoba on suspicion of entering illegally has been in the single digits in each of the last quarterly periods. The program was part of a political effort to respond to U.S. border rhetoric, but critics say it diverted officers from their core duties without producing measurable results. The union said the Conservation Service has vacant positions and the border work leaves less time for officers to enforce hunting laws and perform other duties. In Ontario, LGI reporter Anushka Yadav at The Pointer looks back 1 year after Bill 212, the legislation that accelerated Highway 413. The story traces how environmental protections were weakened, bike lane removals were mandated, and major planning decisions were made with limited transparency. The court ruling has since found parts of the legislation unconstitutional, noting it put vulnerable road users at risk. The highway saw no Indigenous consultations or environmental assessments. On top of that, a Freedom of Information request revealed that the project would directly impact 52 watercourses that support wildlife and fish populations. In a separate LGI story from Canada's National Observer, reporter Sanal Gupta shows how gaps in federal authority and funding continue to displace Indigenous elders who require long-term care. Access to information records highlight jurisdictional voids, the absence of infrastructure funding for on-reserve facilities, and the consequences of relocating elders far from home, language, and culture. Documents reveal that current federal support ranges from in-home health services to per diem funding for low-income individuals in long-term care, but ISC cannot fund the construction of full operation of care homes on reserve. Despite no infrastructure authorities for long-term and continuing care currently in place, some communities have received one-time federal support. Reporting from St. John's, Newfoundland, LGI reporter Justin Brake at The Independent brings us a story that says the provincial government was close to introducing legislation around the internal use of AI, but ran out of time before governments changed after the fall general election. If the bill were passed, it would have introduced legislation around the use of AI in the public and private sectors. Sarah Stooley, MHA, for the St. John's riding of Mount Skio, said in the absence of federal legislation, Newfoundland needs its own AI legislation. In consumer privacy, the Canadian Press reports a proposed $4.49 million settlement in the class action suit against 23andMe, after a breach exposed the sensitive genetic data of nearly 320,000 Canadians. Eligible individuals could receive up to $2,500 depending on documented losses, though the agreement remains subject to Canadian and U.S. court approval. A press release says the proposed settlement is a compromise of disputed claims and not an admission of guilt by 23andMe. The settlement would apply to any customer of 23andMe between May 1st, 2023 and October 1st, 2023, who resided in Canada and received a notice confirming their personal information was compromised. In British Columbia, police in Kelowna and Abbotsford are warning residents about fake speeding ticket texts that attempt to capture dates of birth and credit card information. Authorities stress that real tickets are never issued by text message. People who receive fake texts are asked to avoid clicking on the included links and are to delete the messages, while also blocking the number. Police also suggest people who may have already given their personal information in such a scheme to contact their financial institution, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, and a credit monitoring agency. And in Manitoba, LGI reporter Brenda Sawatsky at the Niverville Citizen notes that RCMP cybercrime units are urging extra vigilance this holiday season as scammers deploy increasingly convincing fake ads, spoofed retailer websites, and package delivery alerts designed to capture personal information. The RCMP gave several ways to check if the site you are visiting is a scam, including checking for typos in the URL or on the website, running your own search for their website through a reliable search engine, and taking note of ads that are posted by social media accounts that were recently created. Also, in the Atlantic region, the province of Nova Scotia is continuing to face intense scrutiny over the handling of a major cyber attack at the power utility. Two separate reports show Premier Tim Houston pushing for penalties and a full investigation, citing inaccurate billing, compromised personal data, and what he describes as a dismissive response from the utility without providing adequate explanations to affected customers. The Premier says the government is considering whether to fine the utility, but adds that ratepayers would not bear the burden of any potential financial penalties. The investigation would investigate the way the private utility has billed customers since a system breach in March. And now to global developments. In the United States, the Justice Department is preparing to release a large tranche of records tied to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Associated Press reporting shows federal lawyers asking courts to unseal search warrants, financial documents, device data, and survivor interview notes. A new law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, requires a searchable public release by December 19th, subject to redactions protecting survivors. The Justice Department submitted a list the day after the U.S. District Judge ordered the government to specify what materials it plans to publicly release from Maxwell's case. The Justice Department characterized the material it wants unsealed in broad terms, describing it as grand jury transcripts and exhibits. Meanwhile, in Colorado, state officials say they will not transfer former county clerk Tina Peters to federal custody, despite a request from the Trump administration. Peters is serving a 9-year sentence for orchestrating a data breach of county voting systems. The Bureau of Prisons requested on November 12th that the State Corrections Department transfer her to federal custody to serve her sentence, though the reason is unknown. A copy of the request released by the State Corrections Department was heavily redacted. The department said releasing that information was contrary to the public interest. In California, the Oakland Side reports that Oakland police are refusing to release body camera footage in the in-custody death of former NFL player Doug Martin. The department argues the incident does not meet the threshold of a critical incident requiring disclosure, a decision already drawing scrutiny from transparency advocates. The acting police chief said under the State Public Records Act public interest balancing test exemption, and because the Community Police Review Agency, or CPRA, is investigating the incident, the video and audio records may be kept secret. According to the balancing test exemption, agencies may keep records secret if the public interest in doing so outweighs the public interest in disclosing them. And in Washington, the administration is warning that SNAP administrative funding may be withheld from states that do not share immigration status data about food aid recipients. More than 20 states have challenged the order, arguing it would compel them to disclose sensitive personal information without legal authority. Federal law allows the USDA to withhold some of the money states receive for administering SNAP if there's a pattern of noncompliance with certain federal regulations. However, according to a law professor, there's never authority to withhold the SNAP benefits. And in this case, there is also no authority to withhold the administrative funding. Finally, Australia is set to enforce a new minimum age of 16 for all major social media platforms. Companies will need to close underage accounts and report monthly removal numbers, with fines reaching $33 million for noncompliance. Platforms including Meta, TikTok, Google, and Twitch will be required to demonstrate active age assurance systems beginning next week. Google said Wednesday that anyone in Australia under 16 would be signed out of its platform, YouTube, from December 10th and lose features accessible only to account holders, such as playlists. Google would determine YouTube account holders' ages based on personal data contained in associated Google accounts and other signals. Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, said suspected young children will be removed from those platforms starting Thursday. Account holders 16 and older who were mistakenly removed could contact Yoti Age Verification and verify their age by providing government-issued IDs or a video selfie, Meta said. As always, we hope today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues in privacy, information management, and public transparency. It was great speaking this week with BC OIPC Commissioner Michael Harvey. You'll find clips in our Shorts feed, and the full conversation is coming soon. To help us keep the mics on, be sure to subscribe to FIPA News Monitoring or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thanks for joining. A big FIPA thank you to the reporters, editors, and publishers who make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners. Stay safe and stay informed.